This is Captain DeBuck. He has served on the police department for over 30 years. He is a fantastic person, a great mentor for many on the department. He's like a legend. I personally think he's the first Hercules.
He is a legend.
Well, he is a legend. He's the first Hercules, I believe. I think he's definitely a demigod, especially here for the Albuquerque Police Department. Again, he's been a great mentor for many on the department, all the way from cadets, all the way up to chiefs and people like that. So without further ado, we will go ahead and turn the time over to you, Captain DeBuck.
Thank you. What an introduction. Thank you. It's just because I've been hanging around so long that's why they say such nice things. But I'm really glad we're having this discussion. Just real quick, I joined the police department in 1986, and I retired as the captain at the end of 2006. I was separated for a year and a half, and I've been back on the department for 13 years, and I've done a lot of different things since my return. But I want to talk about the issue of suicide from a personal perspective. And I think the whole issue of suicide is certainly a huge issue for law enforcement. Certainly it has been something that has been a huge factor in police work and in our police lives, is the issue of police suicide. I know that the suicide rate for police officers is higher than the norm. And especially when I came on in 86, like I said, I started the academy in 86. There wasn't much help out there for people suffering from mental health issues. And truly there was a stigma associated with somebody that was struggling with mental health issues. Yeah, certainly the feeling back then, and you have to remember back then, I was working with people that were Vietnam vets, were still on the department. So there wasn't a safety net really in place for people that were struggling. So if you were struggling with mental health issues, you kept it to yourself, because there was a legitimate concern that if you came forward saying that I'm suffering from an anxiety disorder or depression, that you would be let go. You probably would be let go. You probably would be fired. Yeah. Back in the day, strength was the overriding characteristic that was associated with being a police officer. And that also wasn't just physical strength, it was emotional strength. You couldn't show that you were upset. You had to show that you were resolute in dealing with any type of disaster or any type of personal calamity. So the whole culture has changed in policing. I was at probably 3 years ago, a very well-respected member of the police department in a very fairly high-ranking person said, "I'm struggling with a mental illness." Wow. In my day, you could never say that. You could never say that. If you were dealing with mental issues, if you had a crisis in your family, if you had a personal tragedy, you went to the bottle and you dealt with it that way. And a lot of times at the end of the bottle was a gun. And, one of the common refrains that we would hear certainly through the years was, "Oh, he ate his gun." And because guns were so, we're a gun culture, right? Guns are very accessible to all of us. But things have changed over the years, and people can come forward and say, "Look, I'm struggling, I need help." People are more willing to reach out and help. But my own journey through the issue or the whole issue of suicidal ideation really is a personal one for me. It's hard for me to talk about, but I want to make one thing really clear, that I love this profession. I love police officers. You are my brothers and sisters. You are a second family to me. Make no mistake. We are under greater pressures now than ever before, which I believe will contribute to suicidal ideation amongst police. But remember, we have to take care of each other. The only ones we can count on are each other. Don't forget that. If somebody is struggling, step up and help them, because we are all we've got. Don't forget that. We are still a family. So my own struggle started in March of 1988. My 6-year-old son died suddenly in my arms. let's talk about empathy. And empathy is really, if you have kids, I want you to spend a few seconds thinking about what it would be like to lose a son or a daughter. Think about that. How do you go on? So a lot of people say, well, I couldn't live. What choice do you have? Either live or you don't. In my case, we had grief counselors come over and outside of law enforcement had come over. We really didn't have a behavioral health division that I remember. It was the peer support people were called the rubber gun squad because their guns were taken away from them because they had some issues, and they were now peer support people. So that's completely archaic and a way of dealing with issues like that. So there was really no help, I felt, from organized help from the police department. But what helped me was all the police officers, my brothers and sisters who continually would come by the house. Officers would come by and check on us. They would bring us food. They were always there. I just remember a constant stream of police officers bringing envelopes of money because they didn't know what else to do. They knew we had expenses, but just envelopes of money, incredible amounts of cash, and just people bringing food and officers that you would think that were legends at our time showing up at my doorstep. The chief calling me up, my captain calling me in. If there's anything you want, you just have to ask for it. Day shift, whatever. And remember, I was just a rookie then. I was just a brand new rookie in '88, really. So the rank and file, like the muskox, when they sense danger, they circle around and they protect the people, their baby muskox in the middle. They form that perimeter. That's what it was like for me. I felt my police officers were a shield, my fellow officers were a shield, and that's where it became glaringly obvious to me what it meant to be a part of the police culture, where we take care of our own. But as far as like structured care, it really wasn't in existence back then. So I was dealing with the death of my son, and there were a lot of times that I found myself with the 45 in my mouth. It was a 6 hour 45, I can remember it clearly, with the trigger going back. I could remember being at a drive-in to get some McDonald's or whatever, pulled out my gun, put it in my mouth, and started pulling the trigger. Because I was in such overwhelming grief at that moment. I was in such overwhelming pain. I didn't know what else to do. He was my son. He was my flesh and blood. And to lose him was absolutely catastrophic and overwhelming. And you feel like nobody can help you. I remember one day coming home and I had been drinking, and I got in the pickup truck that was in the driveway. I had a snub nose 357, and I was going to do it. And there's no question. My wife came out. I had my gun. My plan was to go to my son's grave and blow my brains out, and I was going to do it. I had made up my mind to do that. The only way she was able to stop me was I had one of my academy instructors who had been my academy instructor, lived literally 2 houses over. She says, I'm going to go get Ted. If you do this, I'm going to go get Ted. And it was the whole idea of being embarrassed that I was in this situation that stopped me. Otherwise, I would not be talking here right now to you. I had made up my mind to do it. What kept me alive? That's the question. And then Dr. Rosenbaum brought that up. I was dealing with an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. What kept me alive? The only thing that really kept me alive from really, pulling that trigger, and thank God the 6 hours of double action, or again, I wouldn't be here. But the only thing that stopped me from pulling that trigger all the way was that I had a young son to live for, another son, Sean. He was a young child at the time, a little baby, 2 years old. And so the thought of him growing up without a father stopped me from ultimately killing myself. So, you know, I had to grab on to that reason, that motivation to keep on going. And that was Sean. Sean saved my life, really, if you look at it. I mean, I had episodes where I was planning on killing myself, and my wife intervened that one time in particular. But when it really came down to it, it was the fact that I had my other son, and I didn't want to leave him without a father. And you always hear you know, that time heals all wounds. Well, there's some things that time does not heal. Time doesn't heal the death of a son or a daughter. It doesn't. It just doesn't. It never will. We had Officer Talley, Eric Talley, Highland High School graduate, Boulder, Colorado. We had about, a month ago, we had an active shooter situation. He did what he was supposed to do. The new protocols are the first officer on scene goes in an active shooter situation, and he was shot in the head and killed. I thought in my mind, the first thing that came to my mind was we need to get his mom out to the stables. I work with the APD horse mounted unit right now. So my mind going through my mind is we need to get her out to the stables. She needs to be around horses. Horses have an incredible calming effect on people. Of course, they're used for equine therapy. So eventually it took a while and I had to be pretty insistent, but we finally got her out there and she came out and she was a mess. And I was talking to her and before we saw the horses and I almost said, you know, time will heal, but I didn't because it's not true. Not when you lose a son like she did. But what I told her, and it is true, is that time will change your perspective on what has happened. You learn to live with it. It always hurts. And with my son, there even today, this is 1988, even today, there will be something, and who knows what it is, that will trigger an emotional reaction in me, where I will break down and start crying. And I just lose it for a while. Doesn't happen very often now, but certainly over the years, I would have those triggers and you don't know what triggers it. I mean, I didn't know specifically what it was, but I would have it. But over the years, it was something that I learned to live with. And I had talked to Officer Judy Talley, is her name. And I said, you know, time will change how you perceive it. And, you know, she was just sobbing and she goes, I don't see how, you know, I'm never going to feel the same. I go, you're not going to feel the same. You have to, I asked her, do you have a daughter? Do you have any other kids? Yeah, I have a daughter. Well, there's your anchor. There's your hook right there. And we took her around to see the horses. We have 11 horses with the department. And at the end of it, we presented her with something. At the end of it, she took a deep breath and she said, this is the first time since I lost my son that I can breathe. Wow. So I think that with the whole, it was very emotional for me because I've been there. You know, everybody has their own life experiences and we've learned that. Certainly early on when I came back, I got very involved with crisis intervention training and learned that one of the things that was taught to us by Dr. Rosenbaum is that you don't truly understand what somebody's going through, even though you face the same situation or the same tragedy or trauma. You don't know how that person is processing it, because out of the billions of people that have ever been on this planet, there is only one you. There is only one you. And nobody knows you like you do. So even though I had walked in the steps that she walked in, we're in a club that nobody wants to be in. I don't know exactly what she's going through. All I know is what I went through. And, you know, at the time, like I said, the individual police officers that would come to the house and you know, and ranking officers that would come and check on me, that meant a lot to me. Now, that wasn't the major factor behind me not killing myself, but the fact that they would care, that they continued to come over, that they didn't forget about me. I remember getting a call soon after I had come back, and it was a dead child call. Another officer came over the air and said, "Code for that unit, PD, I'll take that call." Wow, that's support. That's support right there. And I really want to emphasize to all police officers and families of police officers, we're going through a tough time right now. I'm not going to try to kid you. I always speak to the cadets, every cadet class. I'll talk about the whole issue of policing, what it is to be a cop. Well, that's changing. But there's one thing that they can't take away from us. It's our sense of who we are, our identity. If you're a cop or a family of a cop, you're not like the average person. You're not. Because by being a cop, you have made a pact. And that pact is that you are willing to die for what you believe in. There is something out there worth dying for. That makes you special. So when you see somebody hurting, especially anybody, but especially a fellow officer, a family member, reach out to them. I was just telling Dr. Rosenbaum, I saw somebody that I knew was hurting. I didn't know her that well, but I could tell she was down. So I just talked to her. Be there for each other. I really don't have anything more to say about this topic. You know, it was over the years, it became easier for me to manage, but horrible thoughts go through your mind. I remember taking my twins, I eventually had twins, to daycare. And I remember some kid coming up to me, a nice kid. You used to have another son too. And I remember just the thought came to me in a flash, why couldn't you have died instead of him? Wow, what a thought to have. But I meant it. I was in so much agony and so much grief. What if I had pulled that trigger? What if I had pulled that trigger? I have two twins, twin boys, Kyle and Ryan, that came after Sean. They wouldn't be here today. I have Derek. He's 26 now. He wouldn't be here today. I have done a lot of things since 1988. I've accomplished a lot of things. I have changed. I believe I worked at Highland High School for a long time. I've had kids that say that I've changed their lives. That wouldn't have happened if I had pulled the trigger. The officers that I commanded over the years as a sergeant, lieutenant, and captain, some of them, you know, just the love that I get from them, I wouldn't have if I had pulled that trigger. You know, it's like a pebble you throw into a lake, and I know it's a cliche, but it has a ripple effect. What would the world have been like if I had pulled that trigger? My own personal world, the world of people around me. Well, there wouldn't have been those kids I talked about, my sons. There wouldn't have been the kids I worked with through coaching wrestling, through teaching martial arts. There wouldn't have been the personal accomplishments that I made, the friends that I made over the years. And you know, we all want to make a difference. We all want to say at the end of our life, because I'm talking to people that are in law enforcement or associated with law enforcement, you all want to say at the end of the day that I made a difference. Well, you can't make a difference if you're not here. And suicide, it's real. It's a real concern for police. We deal with PTSD, which is minimized amongst the society at large with police. I get the feeling they don't give a rat's ass about the PTSD that we go through. And God bless our military, love them. But so much study and work has been done with people with military with PTSD, but the whole issue of PTSD amongst cops is a relatively new phenomenon that's being looked at. I know each and every one of you out there that's a police officer has seen horrific things in your career. And with police, with military, it's more of like a traumatic boom experience. With police, it builds and builds and builds to the point where an officer will go out in the field, take out his gun and blow his brains out. Well, there's help out there. It could be you walking up to an officer that you know is struggling and saying, I'm here to help. Talk about ambivalence. Most people, they don't want to die, but they need a little help. They need a hand up. And you need to be there to do that. I'm going to say this again. Yes, we are under assault. Yes, our profession is under attack, but you got to be like the muskox. You got to form that shield, and you got to protect each other. You have to. That is your duty. Don't ever forget that, ever. Love you guys.
Does anyone have a question? Does anyone have any questions or comments for Captain DeBuck? You can either write it in the chat or you can unmute yourself. I know Dr. Rosenbaum already.
Oh, yeah, I have a question for you. Have you had other times where you dealt with anxiety or stress or trauma, you know, that's not as obvious? You know what I mean? Like if someone in your family dies, everybody knows that you're grieving.
Right.
But if you're 5 years on and now you're just feeling anxious or depressed, people may not know. I mean, have you had to deal with any of that kind of stuff?
Very good point. A very good question. If you had asked me this back 20 years ago, I would have evaded the question. I wouldn't have answered it. But you know what? I'm going to step up. When I was in graduate school, I started struggling with an anxiety disorder, and I went and got help. The loss of my son aggravated that disorder, as you could, I would hope you would be able to imagine. Let's put our empathy hat on. So yeah, I've struggled with anxiety my whole life. It's been a struggle. Sometimes, you know, it's not that much of an issue now, but certainly when I was younger, I struggled with it. There was times when I thought to myself, I just can't go on. I mean, I can't. With intense anxiety, it's hard to focus. Police work was salvation for me because at work, I really didn't have that much anxiety because I was focused. And the problem is when I went home and didn't have something to focus on, all those thoughts would start churning in my head. Yeah, and it wasn't obvious. If you get cancer or you have a physical ailment, you get a horrific injury, people understand, oh God, that's horrible. You got cancer, or wow, you got shot. Wow, that's horrible. They understand, they can be empathetic. But so many people, if you look normal and you're functioning at a high level, you know, I got a master's degree, I got two black belts. I've accomplished a lot. I know that. So people will look and say, you're a success. What's your problem? You don't got a problem. Well, I did. I did have a problem. And I struggled with it. So for you out there, and not only you that are watching or listening, but those that you may talk to, if you know somebody's struggling, you may not understand it, but that doesn't mean the pain isn't real. It doesn't mean the pain isn't real to them. So when somebody says, I'm struggling with a mental health disorder, just because you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not painful for them. When you see an open flesh wound, you know that hurts. But you want to know what hurts more? It's here. It's here. when you feel like your brain is turned against you. But there's help out there. Back in my day, if I said something like that, I wouldn't be on the police department. And I will say this, and I don't mean to be immodest, but I believe that the Albuquerque Police Department is better because I was here. I believe that in my heart. I love this agency. We're under attack right now, but I still love it. I had a great career, traveled all over the United States for the Albuquerque Police Department. Love it. Love my brother and sister officers. Love you guys. I do. I was a national judo champion at one time, but even back then I was petrified that the department would find out that I was dealing with anxiety and that I took medication for it because I felt I would be fired. And I might have been, I don't know. That's not the case anymore. I have support. I have behavioral services that can support me. I have fellow officers that support me. And if there's somebody out there that says you're less of a man because you're struggling with mental health disorder, you're struggling with anxiety, go fuck yourself. And I sincerely mean it. 63 years old, I'll still try to kick your ass. So what I'm saying is, if you're struggling, be like that guy I admire 3 or 4 years ago that in open forum said, I'm struggling. He's successful. He's high ranking. He's a successful man. But what he said took courage. It took a lot of courage. So the cops of the past, which I'm very proud to be a part of that legacy, they wouldn't have understood. I believe you guys will, but if you don't, fuck you.
Well said.
One thing that I love about you, Captain DeBuck, is you're not scared to put it bluntly. Very different from us millennials.
I've been knocked out before and choked out. Doesn't matter.
So I actually have a question for you. I've noticed that there's been times, and you kind of like addressed it, where something, and it can be completely random, can trigger an emotion for you. How did you overcome that, and how did you build resiliency for when those random times came? I know that's something that I personally can feel, but I don't know how to always, I guess, control it, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. I remember vividly, I had gone to see with the SCION, the Last Samurai when it came out. You know, the personal culture that I adhere to is Bushido, the way of the warrior. I grew up doing martial arts my whole life. It's an Eastern philosophy that deals with mindfulness and just your role in the big scheme of things. So the Last Samurai really hit me because it had the death scene at the end where the samurai is dying, where the one of the last of the shoguns is dying because Japan has been reorganized and westernized. I was driving home and I just started sobbing uncontrollably. It just hit me, boom. Like, wow. And I called one of my friends, a close friend, and said, I'm hurting. I was sobbing on the phone. He talked me through it. He was there. I have those moments, not as often now. You know, like I said, I will never be the Rob DeBuck prior to 1988. Never, ever. But I've learned to live with it. And so when I have those episodes, and I still do, just not as often, I reach out to my wife or my sons. You know, my wife guess what? She lived through it too. And my son is a clinical social worker. He got his master's at Columbia. And I don't go to him for therapy sessions, but when he knows I'm hurting, I tell him. I don't have a problem telling my kids, I'm hurting right now. My dad died of dementia. He was a brilliant engineer, brilliant man, ripped, shredded up until he died. And when he was 78 years old, he accomplished a lot in his life. But at about 73, 72, he started experiencing dementia. Outside the loss of my son, that has been the most traumatic experience in my life, watching him disappear in front of my eyes. I still deal with that. I know I have PTSD from it. I do. I know it. And it's rough. I'm not going to say it's easy. I just saw a movie that rocked me to my core. I'm with the Screen Actors Guild. Don't like to talk about it. But I am. And because of that, they send me movies to review because I vote in the SAG Awards. The movie they sent, a lot of these movies I would never go see. One movie they sent me was called The Father with Anthony Hopkins. So I didn't know what it was about. I just plugged it in, I'm watching it. First I thought, wow, this is some type of mystery. Well, I soon realized that it was this Anthony Hopkins' character is struggling with dementia. And the world looks good to him. It looks right to him. And he doesn't understand why it doesn't seem right to everybody else. If you are dealing with a family member that has dementia, it's going to be rough. It will rip your heart out. Watch that movie. Because I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. Dad, how can you be saying these things? After seeing that movie, I have a better understanding of what my dad went through. But I cried and I cried and I cried after I saw that movie. I did. I really did. I gave it to my doctor, who's a good friend of mine. He has a relative dealing with dementia. Same with him. It ripped his soul. But it gives you the perspective of what your loved one is dealing with. It's a great, great movie.
Sergeant Crook, you had a question, right?
Yeah, I did. I just typed it in the chat, but I could just voice it too. Since you mentioned with yours and that other person's example, you guys have another family or other children that really help you in your decision to hang on. What about the officers that maybe don't have those same things too, where you really have to find another anchor or something else for them to choose not to commit suicide?
I'm going to be honest. Obviously, I think if anybody knows me knows that if anything, I'm honest. Yeah, dogs are real important to me. I have a massive now 185-pound goofball. Love them. I'm here to tell you, a dog, it's just having a dog wouldn't have been enough. So my answer to that is maybe they won't. Maybe they won't survive. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll do it. There's no easy answer to this. I tell people, I got to go teach an active shooter class after this. I tell people when I teach it, I'm not a politician. I'm not going to tell you everything's going to turn out all right. I don't have to. Yeah, that sense of hopelessness. If there's nothing for them to grab onto and hold on to, you might lose them. You might lose them.
Another question came in and it asked, any advice you can give to other parents who have lost children that you feel has most helped you?
I think it's just the will to hang on, to find something that's worth living for. What saved me was Sean. I had another son. Just like the previous question, if I didn't have Sean, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I feel very confident saying that. I would have been one of the ones that was lost. There wasn't enough to keep me here without him. Even with him, I almost did it several times, almost. I was so close. I think it's, finding something in your life worth living for. That's what helped me. When I looked into Officer Talley's mom's eyes, I just saw despair and hopelessness. The only thing I could think of was to talk about her daughter. Her eyes lit up a little bit. So there's a little spark there, something for her to grab onto. In my opinion, and I certainly, I'm not educated in this area, you got to find something to hold on to. You got to find a reason to live. We talk about the military and police, that we feel so strongly about something that we're willing to give our life for it. And I believe that. That's Bushido. That's something I believe in. But when you're faced with a trauma like losing a child, you got to find something in your life worth living for. And how you do it, I don't know. If you're faith-based, you can seek solace in the church. Everybody has difference. I'm not overly religious. If you're really very religious, you have that paradigm or that spiritual belief that you will see your son again, you will see your loved one again. And if you have that, good for you. Hold on to it. People would come up to my wife, and that's why I'm not an atheist. I believe, but I'm not a big churchgoer either. I'm hedging my bets here, okay? My wife is angry at organized religion because so many people came up to her and said, it was God's plan. God had a plan for you. Really? God took my 6-year-old son from me? What kind of plan is that? That's the wrong thing to say for somebody that's not centered or grounded in religion, which she was not. She's angry. To this day, she's angry about that. So I think you need to be a little careful. But I think it depends. Everybody's different, right? Everybody has a different background. If somebody is very religious, they can hold on to that. I don't know if I'm going to see my son again. But one thing I do know is that when I go, I won't have that pain either. So one way or the other, there will be resolution.
Mark Devana has a question for you. You're still, oh, there you go, Mark.
All right, I got you. You hear me, Captain?
Yes.
Hey, first of all, thank you. Great talk. Second, this is a two-part question. I'm a little long-winded sometimes. Thank you for the good laugh. When you said go fuck yourself. Well, being a Bostonian, we get that right away. But here's the deal on that is I was pushed to the edge by a boss, by a lieutenant, which made me have 2 suicide attempts. The last words I said to that lieutenant ever in my life to him was go fuck himself. It was beautiful. I wish I could have like a plaque or something like that go fuck yourself. So thank you for that. You really put me in a really happy place there. You did. And my question, Captain, is this. You said earlier that you speak to cadets, recruits about going into police work. Yesterday I did a presentation at a local police academy for the current events going on in law enforcement. My job was to motivate them to get in, not leave the job before they started, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, as we know, it's a very toxic environment right now. It's absolutely horrible, and I really feel for our present officers. So my question is this: what is maybe some encouraging words that you tell the cadets or something like that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. What I tell the cadets is that a couple things. One, I know what the police culture meant to me. I grew up in the police world. I knew what the police culture meant for me here. And of course, and then I went to New York. The department had sent me to New York. And policing is different in the East, as you know. It's a tighter, stronger subculture. It is a more insulated culture. I was able to experience that when I was in New York. I also went to the FBI National Academy, so I was very lucky. in that I was surrounded by officers from different parts of the country. I know what a strong culture policing is, especially back east. The Western departments don't tend to be as strongly rooted in the police traditions as the Eastern departments. But we still, you know, back in the day, you know, if you said you're a cop, you know what that meant. Yeah, I'm a cop. It had certain connotations that went with it. What I tell the cadets is, this is a changing police world. You have to find what it means to be a cop in today's world. But don't lose sight of the fact that you are special, that you are a cut above, that you're willing to put your life on the line for something you believe in. I always really push that and stress it. I used to tell my senior officers when I was a captain, when I would do briefing, it's not the sergeant's job, it's not the lieutenant's job, it is your job to maintain our police culture. Now with the new cadets, they have to find their way, and they will. But the other thing I tell them is this, is that being a cop, even though we're under assault from all sides, but being a cop, and what I tell them is that every day you go to work, every single day you go to work, you can make a difference in somebody's life. And one of the metaphors that I like to use is that, and I tell them, there's this guy on the beach, and there's millions of starfish out on the beach just dying in the sun. But he goes and grabs one and throws it in the water. Some lady goes up to him and says, "Why are you doing that?" "Because I want to save them." There's millions of them around. You're not going to make a difference. Picks up a starfish, throws it into the water. I made a difference to that one.
Wow. That's awesome.
So, I think with our officers in today's culture, today's world that we're living in, my message is one of hope. My message is one of that being unique, that at the end of the day, it's not about how many cars you sold. It's about how many souls you touched. And we as police officers get to do that. I could walk out here. I have a thing at the Citizens. We have a program for aspiring police officers' kids at the Career Enrichment Center. I'll be speaking to them soon. I know I'm going to touch a few of them in that group, because I have them come up to me all the time and say, "Hey, you really made an impression on me." How many jobs do you get to do that every day? Make a difference in somebody's life? Not many. Not many. Thanks for the question. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And that was a great answer. And next time I tell somebody to go fuck themselves, I'm giving you a full 100% correct. Thank you. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
There's been a few comments that have come in the chat to let you know that they were glad to hear your story and that they're very grateful for it. And another one came in that they had to log off, but thank you again for your story and for inspiring them to be better. Another one just came in saying thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for Captain DeBuck? I think I saw a hand. I don't know if that's clapping, Monica, or if that's a hand. Looks like clapping to me because it has a little thing on it. But any other comments or questions for Captain DeBuck?
I would just like to say thank you personally. I think that was great. And I'm so glad you were here, and I'm so glad you are here in general. So excellent.
Well, and I just want to finish with this. I've met cops from literally all over the world. My son was in the Peace Corps. He was stopped. He looks Asian. My wife's half Japanese, and they always used to call him, they used to call him China there all the time. But he was stopped by a cop in Dominican Republic. Policing's a little different there, but it was randomly stopped. And he told the officer, "Oh, my dad is a cop in the United States." He goes, "Oh, really?" He goes, "You're part of the family then. You have a good day." We're all part of the family. Take care of each other. Be there for each other. I can remember being in the South Valley all by myself as a captain. There was shots fired that came out. And within seconds, I was surrounded by a wall of blue officers, my officers. Take care of each other. Be there for each other. We'll get through this storm. We will.
Thank you, Captain DeBuck. We appreciate it. I always love to listen to you. I always love your presentations. They're always great. With that, if you guys have any comments or questions for Captain DeBuck and you want to reach out to him, you can email myself, Dr. Rosenbaum, or Melissa, or you can actually just email Captain DeBuck directly as well, and you can reach out to him that way. We have another session of SCION in June. That'll be June 3rd at 1 o'clock. If no one has anything else, we will see you guys all.
What does
in June.
SCION mean?
Oh, SCION means self-care interactive online.
No, what does the word SCION mean?
Oh, I don't know.
It means descendant of a prominent family, the word SCION.
That's right.
And it does mean self-care interactive online.
Yeah, I was like, no, that's what we.
But we'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you guys all next month.